Newsmaker. I'm Mark Cram. Today, we welcome Colonel Shaun Perkowski to the program. Colonel Perkowski is the commander of the 167th Airlift Wing of the West Virginia Air National Guard in Martinsburg, graduate of the United States Air Force Academy. Colonel Perkowski is a command pilot with more than 5,000 flying hours. That sounds like a lot of time in the air. Welcome. Nice to have you here today.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your background.
All right, as we discussed a little bit earlier, I grew up in Northeast Ohio. At 18, I left home for the Air Force Academy, and I spent about 4 years in Colorado Springs. From there, my wife and I got married after the Air Force Academy. Shortly thereafter, we headed to Texas to fly trainers for a year while she was on active duty with me. And then I stayed behind in Texas for another 5 years. From Texas to fly C-130s in North Carolina. And then in the late 1990s, we decided to move to the eastern panhandle of West Virginia. So Martinsburg was kind enough to look at my credentials and say, come fly with us. And came here in 1998, and I've been a very happily engaged member of the community in the four-state region since then.
Fantastic. Well, welcome to the community. Tell us a little bit about the 167th. I mean, I think certainly most individuals know it's there. Some individuals who've moved in recently will say to me, what are these planes all about? And so, what are the planes all about?
Well, I'm glad you've noticed them. If you look at the history of the wing, we came up from Kanawha in the 50s. Basically, the West Virginia Air National Guard was looking for a location with a runway long enough for the fighter airplanes that were slated to come to West Virginia. Looking around the state, Martinsburg was seen as the location for the airplanes to go to because of the length of the runway. So ever since the 1950s, we've had the 167th Airlift Wing here in Martinsburg in the eastern panhandle of West Virginia. Over the years, we've had multiple aircraft conversions, converting from the fighter planes in the 50s and early 60s to the transport airplanes that we see today. So that heritage comes from transports in the early 60s to the Constellation. You can go to Udvar Hazy in Dulles and see a Connie in West Virginia colors there at the big hangar, to the C-130, which we remember up until about the mid-2000s. So those were a great airplane with a great mission, very engaged, flying those to the mid-2000s to the big C-5. Biggest airplane the Air Force flies. C-5s until just a few years ago, and we've transitioned now to the C-17.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that transition. We heard the C-5s are coming. The community loves the 167th, but every time there's a change, you hear people go, how much noise is that going to make? Let's talk a little bit about the C-17. How is it different than the C-5?
Well, thanks for that question. The C-17, there's some just objective differences. C-5 can carry basically twice the load that a C-17 can. But in being such a big strategic airlifter that the C-5 is, there were some limitations to operating the airplane. So we would need the bigger airports, the longer runways. The C-17, that basically can carry half the payload that a C-5 can, but it is still a very robust payload. So in operating the C-17, we not only have that strategic capability where we're flying long distances, we have a tactical capability to go into short airfields, kind of like the C-130s were, where we could fly the low-level routes to the short runways, get in, release our equipment, offload it, and get out of the area we've landed at. So the C-17 has a more, I would say, robust training requirement than the C-5 had. So part of that robust training requirement requires our pilots and our loadmasters that fly the airplane to train. So we see the airplanes training locally. And that is a great opportunity for us that we didn't have with the C-5. So in training those airplanes locally, we see the airplanes flying in the local area more. So if you look up in the night sky maybe or the day sky, you'll see an airplane in the pattern in Martinsburg that we didn't used to see in the past.
Okay. Now the C-17, though, is a jet versus the prop like the 130 was.
Yes, just like the C-5, the C-17 has two modern turbofan engines on it, or four modern, rather, turbofan engines.
Fantastic. All right, well, stick with us. We're going to continue our conversation with Colonel Shaun Perkowski and look back at the history of the Air Guard in the Eastern Panhandle right after this.